there are a few scenarios where the 50-year mortgage makes sense. And it's not what you think. And like anything, mortgage advice has nuance. This is my frustration with like the Dave Ramseys of the world, where they're like, you have to do it this way. Well, there's nuance, there's gray, there's everybody's situation is different. Here are a few scenarios where the 50-year mortgage might actually make sense. And it's interesting that we're going down this road because I actually bought my house that we just sold. We bought the house on a 0 down interest only loan, which is insane now that I think about it. But we made some pretty good bank on it. We owned the house 22 years, so we made some pretty good cash on it. But those first 10 years, we made like no money. We were actually underwater for several years, and we actually went through the meltdown of 2008 while we were in that house. We were way underwater on paper during those years. Luckily, we didn't sell it, so we were okay. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you really have to think about. Is first of all, how long do I keep the house? And secondly, what scenarios does this program make sense? And so the first one is this idea of pay the least, invest the rest. And so Dan Keller, who I just mentioned, that's kind of the philosophy he has. He goes after more higher net worth borrowers. And he pointed out that you can typically get higher rates of return in the stock market than you can from a mortgage rate. So if the mortgage is in the 6s, you can probably get 9 to 10%. So you're making that spread by basically, pay the least, invest the rest. And the smart thing about that strategy is, if you have a lot of money in the market and then you have to sell your house all of a sudden for whatever reason, take that loss, you're sitting there with cash in the bank, and you can always take that money back out of the stock market and pay that house off if something ever happened. So that's one idea on a way you could do that. The other one is commission and bonus income. Maybe if you have a lot of commissions, a lot of bonuses, especially if you're new to your job and that hasn't really counted yet, or there's a big pay increase coming up, then potentially, maybe it's smart to take that 50, and then when you start getting those commissions and bonuses, starting to pay down the loan and pay it, as you make more money, make a little extra payment, and then you have that lower minimum payment. And so that certainly is one route where this does make sense. So again, we said pay raise coming. The other one, very similar, self-employment. If you're self-employed, you started your business, you're trying to qualify, but you have a lot of tax deductions, and maybe you don't qualify for that amount that you actually need. You could use the 50 to qualify for more money. There are a few scenarios because nothing's ever cut and dry in the mortgage industry. And thank you, Dan Keller, for pointing this out to me, because I didn't really think about it. I was thinking much more linearly and laterally on my initial thoughts on this. But I don't know what you think. What are your thoughts on the 50? If Trump's proposal becomes law, would you take one? Comment below and hear what you think.